welcome you to my studio. My name is Curlee Raven Holton, and I'm in the collection of Delaware Art Museum. I'm pleased to give you a chance to look at my studio and explain my work to you. My painting and drawing studio is a refurbished, restored schoolhouse, one-room schoolhouse built in 1902. So please join me. Welcome to my studio. As I mentioned, this is a restored schoolhouse that I did by hand, and I wanted to create a space in which was quiet, where there could be solitude and where I could practice undisturbed. And this has been a perfect place for my practice as an artist. So in here I do drawing and painting primarily, and I'll show you a little later on my printmaking studio, and I'll talk to you about those processes also. So the first thing I want to show you is a work that is a preliminary study. And I do that for almost all my works. I do a sketch, a drawing, a small watercolor, and it allows me to resolve some issues or concerns or thoughts and to see how I'm observing the subject. And the ideal is to have as much close scrutiny as possible, so doing preliminary allows me to look, and each time I'm able to look deeper into what I'm attempting to do and think more deeply about it. So the drawing, the sketch, the watercolor is an exercise. First one I want to show you is a small watercolor I've done. I completed this morning. I'm a musician. So I play with the colors, I see how they work, how they mix with each other. When I started out doing these, I began light to dark. And that wasn't as dramatic as I would have wanted, so I began to go now dark to light, which is kind of unusual for building a watercolor. But it goes on to the drama of the piece and the gesture of the piece. So watercolors are far freer than the oil or acrylics. They're more tactile, more concrete. So there's a certain kind of spontaneity and emotion that comes to a watercolor that is not always captured in acrylic or an oil painting. For example, let me show you, again, another example of a small watercolor that I did in preparation for a painting. This is actually my granddaughter. And I want to put her in a scene of a oriental landscape, dramatic mountains and valleys, and have her standing on the edge of a cliff. And then I looked at it closely and says, I should have her with a reference to wings in her background, almost angelic, that she can stand on the parapet, but also feel secure and confident and have blind faith and courage. And that's what the piece is about, especially as a young child. You have the sense that you can be everything and there's no restrictions, no threat to you. And the title of the piece, I've just finished titling, is Yellow Fantasy Cake. Or Yellow Cake Fantasy. I haven't decided yet. The ideal that the sweet cake, the sweet gift, gives you this sense that all is right with the world. But of course it's not. It's a very threatening place. So here is a yellow cake in her hand, her party dress. She has wild blonde hair. It's actually my granddaughter. And then I poured different inks and acrylics in the background to give this illusion of movement, this illusion of depth. And the process began with me thinking I would sand them down to a softness, as I've done other pieces. But I thought that this was very effective as it is rich. It doesn't need to be sanded down to create that illusion of space. So you see a watercolor, in this particular case, after I did the watercolor, I erased it and I sanded it down, made it softer, and realized that that wasn't what I wanted in the end. So sometimes the work of art can define itself for you. We start the process, but the process is always, more often than not, finished by the work itself. Another example is a watercolor. This is the first watercolor I've done this year. You see the small sketch, which I like better than a large watercolor, but you can see the small sketch and wash. And I love the drums here. And then actually the most successful part of this, the most striking part to me, is this contrast of the yellow against the rich blues on the drum set. Another piece that I finished recently as part of the Deluge series This is the final piece, and it's called the Siren Song. And it's about lifting these voices that are crossing this perilous environment, flooding, storms, but they have faith. And the siren sings a song of possibility, of transcendence, of illumination. And they're celebrating this. Although they're in this large, flooded area, they have faith in their possibilities. And they're warmed. There's a warmth with the orange that I've applied. There's an inner warmth, even though it's a very gray and dark setting. This is a piece that I've also finished recently. It's called Find Me. So I'm doing two series of work. One was a Deluge series, which is 9 pieces, and another series which is called Finding Me. And the ideal is to discover under close scrutiny who I am as a person and as an artist. So I do a detailed portrait, and then I strip it away with paint remover, and what remains are echoes from the original drawing, as if the body is being stripped of its defenses, stripped of its social values, moving toward a more essential self. And so it's highly polished except for the hand. So it gives a sense that there's a mirror that the figure is looking through. And a mirror is a reflection, but it's also a barrier. So the piece allows me to strip away certain kind of egocentric, socialized identities so I can get down to an essential self. And that essential self, then I come back and I do nuances and highlights. And again, the hand in the foreground is not varnished to create this separation from this highly polished space that the portrait is placed in. So this is a piece that I just started. And as you can see, I took a photograph of the individual sitting. Then I did a preliminary sketch and graphite. And the title of this is called Black Death, Mors Negro. And it's about this ideal of Black Death on multiple levels. The coronavirus, isolation, and demise. So I'm doing this a little differently also. The clothing is patterned acrylic. The background is poor to create this organic atmosphere, this almost oppressive atmosphere with echoes of the atmosphere penetrating the space of the figure, influencing the figure, that our environment does influence us. He has his mask on, protecting himself, almost like a concealment of self. So this is a piece I've just started, and the way I work, you might notice that I work on a piece for a while, then I shift to another piece. And it's not that I'm so scatterbrained in my work process, it's that I know when I'm working on one painting, I'm thinking about another one also. So sometimes choices are revealed to you later on. I may get up in the morning and work on the painting of the yellow fantasy cake. And then 2 days later, I may return to it. I've had time to make decisions about it, because that's the way I work as an artist. It sort of germinates and ferments before I make the next decision about it. So again, revealing the steps in the process. This is a drawing beginning, which is reference to that first watercolor that you saw. And this is a study in blue that I've been calling the series. And this is a little more gestural, captures the drummer playing, the pattern on the shirt. I'm intrigued by that. That'll give me a lot of opportunity to play and engage it. The pink that's cast on the symbols, the gestures of the hand, the echoes of the hand being absorbed into the background or disappearing in the background, and the mouth being defined in such a way that it expresses this sort of transcendent reality that the musician has sunk down into, that has become a part of. And that sinking down into, I believe, is a way in which I talk about, even when I'm writing, you get into that space where you really are creating, and I see it as a sinking down into, a sitting down into. And this figure is surrendering himself to the music. He's hearing the music, and the music is hearing him. So if I can capture that, then the work is effective. And I'm capturing the work because I'm speaking to myself through the work. I'm trying to understand what I'm looking at and the meaning of it for me. And sometimes that's translatable to the audience. But what is important in this space is that I'm stirring it up, I'm nurturing it, and I'm discovering it. And discovering myself as a part of it. Well, thank you so much for visiting my studio. Now I'm going to take an opportunity to take you into my print studio. So this is where I make my print work and also publish works by other noted artists. So I'm in Williams Township, just outside of Easton, PA, on top of a hill. And that solitude and rural location offers me the opportunity to focus on my work and develop my skills and my understanding of my work and how I reconcile my living with my practice. A large printing press where we do stereography. And this is a piece that we're finishing up by R.V. Smith out of Portland, Oregon. These are different proofs of the same image. And we send these proofs to the artist and he makes alterations, and then we make the modifications. And then finally, the artist signs off on a BAT or bonetier, which means good to print, good to go. Sense of how the process works. It is a stereography process. It used to be called silk screen because they actually use a silk mesh, but now it's polyester. And the image is about a blocking out and leaving open mesh parts of the mesh so that the color will be pressed through and move through the screen. So you can see the photo images on, some images, areas are subtle, others are really opaque, and others are completely open. And that's how the color passes through. And the way that happens is there is a welt at the end of the print, end of the screen, that holds the ink, and then the squeegee goes across and pushes the ink down into the screen and onto the paper. And you do that for each and every color. R.V. Smith, again, as I mentioned, is an artist from Portland, Oregon, and he has a major exhibition that has just come out. And our print that we're producing is in honor of the exhibition. You can see a book of his work here. So we work with a lot of artists that are established, and we create prints so that they can broaden their vocabulary and also make their work accessible to the general public. Another project we're working on is with Atlanta-based artist, Alfred Kante. And you can see some of Alfred's work here. This is the plate that we're working on. It's a copper plate. And we're doing an edition, limited edition of 25. Each plate is original. And this is very unusual. Normally the plate is used to create the prints, used as a matrix. But in this particular case, we altered the plate in such a way that the artist felt it mimicked his technique of altering the surface of his paintings. And we decided to do a limited edition of the plate. So we have a number of images you can see up on the walls. Richard Anaskevich, Mel Edwards, Richard Mayhew, David C. Driscoll, Delita Martin, Lois Mabel Jones, a number of noted artists, as well as you'll see some of my works. Faith Ringo, David C. Driscoll, Sam Gilliam, and my teacher and mentor, Robert Blackburn. Now in the studio we have a master printer by the name of Jace Clark. We have a printing assistant named Cody West. We have a director of community outreach and programming, Kate Lee Atkinson. who's actually doing the film right now for us. And what we do is produce the work here. We have upstairs an archive and we house the work. This is one of our popular pieces by Richard Mayhew that is both serigraph and digital. And you can see a new release book on Richard Mayhew's work. So not only do I find a way to practice as an artist, but I also try to find a way to extend my practice by collaborating and working with other artists. So we maintain a collection. Again, Faith Ringo, as I mentioned, Kevin Cole, Jace Clark above. And we use traditional printing processes, serigraph, relief, etching. But we do try to experiment with these processes and push the boundaries of those processes and match the boundaries those processes with the language of the artist. With David Driscoll, we developed a process called texture stereography, so we can mimic the high texture from his paintings. So we did that by creating a screen that could produce and layer emotion, building up that emotion, printing at certain stages. So the emotion would allow for the colors to fold on the edges and create a halo effect, creating this kind of illusion. And that would mean also that each print is uniquely different because the layers, the way the textures are applied. So for the last few months, the time off because of the virus, I have found it, and I haven't always told my friends and colleagues this, because most of the time they're talking about the limitations of it and how it's restricted them so much. I find it as a wonderful moment, of course not the virus or the victims of the virus, but a wonderful moment to have solitude in the practice, uninterrupted practice. When I was a student, it was important to have time to really look at a work of art. If you could just sit in front of it for 6 hours, straight through, just looking at that work of art that you're working on, you could actually see it, truly see it. And as I've gotten more established as both a professor and administrator in arts, you have less and less time to really sit and ponder the work and relate to the work. So now I have that time where I can sit in the studio, go back and forth all day long and look at the work and think about the work. And so that is how I've taken advantage of this opportunity. And it's wonderful. It's going to be hard for me to go back to a regular schedule, because my art over time has a certain kind of fragmented quality because it's disrupted all the time. Although I'm able to carry the image in my head and think about the work and return to it, there's a continual flow that I find has been really good for me and good for the work. So, hope you'll come back sometime and visit. Thank you.